The battlefield was never supposed to reach the medics. The Galactic Accords had been clear. Medical personnel were to be untouchable. The signatories, every major species of the Orion Arm including humanity, had agreed that even in war, there were lines that must never be crossed. The Kryn did not care. Dr. Elias Monroe had seen brutality before. He had been stationed on the hellscapes of Rigel 7, where the atmosphere was toxic, and the ground itself tried to kill you. He had patched soldiers torn apart by sonic cannons, reattached limbs shredded by plasma bursts. But what the Kryn had done here? This was different. This was deliberate. They hadn't just attacked a medical convoy. They had butchered it. The emergency signal had gone out an hour ago. When the reinforcements arrived, all they found were the corpses of doctors, nurses and wounded soldiers, strewn across the jungle clearing like discarded trash. The Kryn hadn't even taken their supplies. They had done this for sport. For cruelty. And humanity did not forgive. Admiral Christopher Lorne stood in the darkened war room aboard the UHS Retribution. His face was unreadable, a cold mask as the hollow projection displayed the massacre site. Around the room, high-ranking officers from the Unified Earth Command sat in silence, their jaws tight, their hands clenched into fists. "We have confirmed reports from the surviving recon drones," General Sato said. Her voice was taut with barely restrained fury. It was the Kryn's 7th Legion. They left no survivors. Even the wounded were executed. The room stayed silent, but the weight in the air was suffocating. Lorne exhaled slowly. "Any response from the Galactic Council?" "They condemned it," Sato scoffed. "Filed a protest with the Kryn warlords." "That's it." "Of course they did." Lorne's lips curled in disgust. "They expect us to accept it? To let it go?" Another officer, General Vance, leaned forward. "But we won't." "No," Lorne said, eyes hard as steel. "We won't." He turned to the holographic interface and tapped a command. A new image replaced the massacre site, a high-security black site deep within the Sol system. A place that officially did not exist. A place where monsters were kept. Vance's mouth twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Are we sure about this, Admiral?" "They crossed the line," Lorne said. "So we erased the line." Sato hesitated. "This will change everything." "It already has," Lorne said. "We gave them the chance to play by the rules. They refused. Now they'll learn what happens when humanity stops holding back." He entered the final authorization code. Project Revenant was now active. Deep beneath the frozen wastelands of Europa, alarms blared. Steel doors, untouched for decades, shuddered open with the sound of grinding metal. Armed guards stood ready, their grips tight on their weapons as the figures within the cells stepped forward. Some had been soldiers. Others had been something far worse. The war criminals of Earth had been locked away for a reason. Now they were free. The silence in the Galactic Council chamber was deafening as the transmission ended. The image of the bloodied human medics, the burning triage tents, and the brutalized bodies of those who had sworn to save lives haunted every being present. The humans had given their warning, and the galaxy trembled at its implications. Admiral Zervier of the Threll Dominion, one of the perpetrators of the massacre, scoffed. "More human bravado. What can they do? Their medical corps is decimated. Their fleets are strong, but war is numbers and attrition. We have both." He turned to his allies, a coalition of empires that had long feared humanity's growing influence. "Let them throw their tantrum. We will crush them the way we should have long ago." Across the stars, on a desolate moon orbiting a gas giant, the doors to a heavily fortified prison groaned open. No warden announced the release. No guard stood watch. There were no farewells. The air was thick with the scent of sweat, rust, and barely contained violence. From the darkness they emerged, men and women in tattered uniforms, their eyes burning with a fury older than the war itself. They were the Forgotten Legion. Once humanity's most feared warriors, they had been sealed away, their crimes too severe even for their own people to stomach. But now Earth had no need for honor. It needed retribution. A single figure stepped forward. His name had been erased from history, but among the damned, he was known as Cain the Butcher. His voice was gravel and steel. "Orders." A single message played on the communicator embedded in his wrist. "You know what they did. You know what must be done. The chains are gone. Make them suffer." For the first time in decades, Cain smiled. "With pleasure." The attack came without warning. The Threll Dominion's fleet, still basking in the glow of their supposed victory, was the first to fall. Reports flooded in, ships vanishing from sensors, entire battalions lost without a trace. The orbital stations orbiting their core worlds went dark, one by one. No transmissions. No survivors. On the Dominion's capital world of Zenthis Prime, a lavish victory celebration was underway. Military officials, warlords, and dignitaries toasted their conquest, oblivious to the horror descending upon them. Then the lights flickered. A low, mechanical hum filled the air, and the sky burned crimson as the first wave of drop pods screamed through the atmosphere. They landed with bone-shattering force, the ground quaking beneath them. Before the alarms could even be sounded, the Forgotten Legion emerged, clad in patched armor, wielding weapons outlawed by every civilized species. The slaughter began. Kane led the charge, a serrated blade in one hand and a plasma caster in the other. A Thrall commander raised his weapon. Kane was faster. The blade cut through bone like wet paper, and the commander crumpled, his scream lost in the chaos. The Legion moved with terrifying precision. They didn't just kill, they dismantled. They set fires, collapsed buildings, and turned the city into a living nightmare. This was not war. It was a lesson. High above, the remaining Thrall fleets scrambled to respond. But every order was met with silence. Their systems had been compromised. The humans had done something, hacked their networks, infiltrated their command structure. But how? "We let them in," Kane murmured as he activated his communicator. "You thought you were hunting us. We were already inside." Across the Dominion strongholds, human saboteurs revealed themselves. Sleeper agents, former prisoners, soldiers left behind, medics who had sworn vengeance. The enemy's defenses crumbled from within. It was over before it had even begun. As Kane stepped over the bodies of the Thrall aristocracy, he raised a bloodied flag. The message was clear. Earth does not forget. Earth does not forgive. In the Galactic Council chambers, the remaining species watched in horror as the live feeds played the carnage. The Council's leader, a venerable Calvar diplomat, turned to the human ambassador, his voice trembling. This is not war. This is annihilation." The human ambassador leaned forward, her expression unreadable. "You made war on our healers. You expected mercy. You get Kane." The council chamber fell silent. No one dared to speak. Then came the final transmission from the Forgotten Legion, broadcast across the galaxy. Kane's voice, calm and resolute, echoed through every system. "Let this be a warning. Earth tried peace. You chose war. You attacked those who save lives. Now there is no surrender. There is no treaty. There is only the Forgotten Legion. We are coming. And you will pray for the mercy you never gave." The screen went black. And across the galaxy, the predators of the stars trembled in fear. The bridge of the UEN Retribution hummed with controlled energy. Tactical readouts flashed across holographic displays, detailing enemy fleet formations, orbital defenses, and planetary security outposts. The United Earth Navy had been holding back, until now. Admiral Thorne's voice was ice-cold. "All ships, execute Operation Eclipse. Full planetary interdiction. I want every hostile ship disabled or destroyed." A dozen confirmations echoed across the comms. The fleet moved as one, a predator awakening from hibernation. In the void above the war-torn planet of Vaktar, the alien Dominion's fleet braced for what they had dismissed as an insignificant retaliatory attempt. They had expected bureaucracy, negotiations, anything but Earth's iron fist striking with surgical precision. The first wave of human warships emerged from hyperspace, deploying Artemis drone swarms, AI-driven fighters that shredded through Dominion lines like a celestial plague. The aliens had spent decades underestimating humanity's strategic capabilities. That mistake had just become their epitaph. A desperate counterattack. Inside the Dominion's command vessel, Grand Marshal Corvier watched in disbelief as his battle fleet collapsed within minutes. How? His mandibles clicked in rage. Their forces are spread too thin. They shouldn't have this level of coordination. A trembling officer stammered, "Sire, the humans, their tactics, they anticipated every one of our maneuvers. Every one." Corvier slammed a clawed fist into his throne. He had studied human warfare. He had seen their past conflicts. They were supposed to be impulsive, reckless, disorganized. But what he was witnessing was precise, methodical annihilation. "Summon the planetary defense forces," Corvier barked. "All ground-based ion cannons, fire everything at the enemy fleet." The skies of Vaktar ignited as anti-ship defenses roared to life, launching waves of high-velocity plasma lances. But instead of evading, the human fleet moved into a seemingly suicidal position, right into the heart of the barrage. It was a feint. Before Corvier could comprehend what was happening, an entire squadron of human Fury bombers burst through the distraction, obliterating the ground-based defenses in a pinpoint attack. The planetary cannons, meant to be their last line of defense, fell silent. The realization hit the alien leader like a death knell. "They were waiting for us to fire," his officer whispered. "Hell descends upon Vokhtar." With planetary defenses neutralized, humanity unleashed its true terror, the Excalibur shock troops. High in orbit, Earth's prison ships, long held in secret by military black sites, opened their docking bays. Their cargo? The worst war criminals, death row inmates, and unrepentant butchers humanity had ever produced. They had been given one chance: fight for Earth, earn their freedom, or die here. And they had accepted with a grin. Drop pods streaked through the sky, burning like hellfire, crashing into Dominion fortresses and military installations. When the first pods hit the ground, silence followed for a fraction of a second. Then the screaming began. The Dominion expected soldiers. What they got was something far worse: humanity's most violent, most cunning, and most ruthless predators unleashed with a singular purpose: vengeance. In the streets of the Vokhtar capital, former death row inmate Darius Cole emerged from the wreckage of his drop pod, his cybernetic arm flexing as he grinned. "Well," he muttered, cracking his knuckles. "Time to earn my damn freedom." The Dominion defenders opened fire. Plasma bolts sizzled past him, but Cole moved like a demon unleashed, weaving through the chaos. He reached the first alien soldier, grabbed its rifle, and ripped it from its grasp before caving its skull in with his augmented fist. The other human inmates stormed the battlefield, unshackled monsters of war. They had nothing to lose. No honor to uphold. No code to follow. And the Dominion learned the hard way: there was nothing more terrifying than a human with nothing left to fear. A message written in fire. Back on the UN Retribution, Admiral Thorne observed the carnage below with cold detachment. The Dominion had declared war on Earth's healers, murdering unarmed medics. Now, the Dominion would experience the full consequence of that decision. "Sir," a lieutenant called out. "Grand Marshal Corvier is requesting surrender negotiations." Thorne's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Patch him through." The alien leader's face flickered onto the holographic display. His once pristine armor was scorched, his mandibles quivering with barely contained rage and fear. Behind him, the capital city burned. This is barbaric." Corvier spat. "You unleash criminals upon us? This is not war, it is savagery." Thorne leaned forward, his voice cold as steel. "You slaughtered our medics, our doctors. We responded in kind." He tilted his head slightly. "And don't mistake this for savagery, Marshal. This is mercy." Corvier's pupils contracted in fear. "Mercy?" Thorne's eyes darkened. "We could have sent our soldiers. The ones trained in honor, in rules of engagement." He gestured toward the battlefield. "Instead we sent the ones who have no rules. No mercy. Because that is what you deserved." Corvier swallowed. What do you want?" Thorne's response was final. "Unconditional surrender. Or we release the next wave." Corvier hesitated for a single second too long. Thorne turned to his comms officer. "Prepare phase 2. The Dominion's leader panicked. "Wait." Thorne raised a brow. "I'm listening." Corvier's shoulders sagged in defeat. We surrender." Thorne's voice carried the weight of judgment. "Then your people will live." The transmission cut. The battle was over. But the lesson? The galaxy would never forget. The silence that followed Grand Marshal Corvier's surrender was unnatural. The Dominion had fought to the last breath on every world it had conquered, never bending, never yielding. But now their might lay shattered, their pride broken. Aboard the UN Retribution, Admiral Thorne sat back in his command chair, watching the flames rise from the Vokhtar capital through the viewport. A surrender was not a victory, not yet. The galaxy would judge humanity for this war, for the decision to unleash Earth's most violent criminals upon an enemy that had dared to break the sacred code of war. And Earth would answer that judgment with steel. "Sir," his comms officer said hesitantly, "we're receiving transmissions from the Galactic Council. They demand an immediate cessation of hostilities." Thorne exhaled slowly. "Here it comes. Put them through." A new hologram flickered into existence, revealing High Arbiter Veshlyre of the Galactic Council. Her reptilian eyes blazed with outrage, her frilled crest trembling. "Admiral Thorne, what is the meaning of this atrocity?" Thorne tilted his head. "Atrocity? You mean the war crime committed by the Dominion against unarmed human medics?" Veshlyer's tongue flicked in agitation. We were prepared to sanction the Dominion for that violation. But instead of justice, you unleashed monsters onto a civilian world. This is beyond warfare, this is retribution. Thorn leaned forward, his voice calm but cold. Exactly. The Arbiter's frills flattened in shock. You admit it? Thorn's fingers drummed against the armrest of his chair. We are not the Dominion. We did not target their civilians. We did not annihilate their cities from orbit. We simply let their warriors reap what they had sown. Veshlyer hissed. You call those things warriors? They were murderers, terrorists, war criminals. Thorn's lips barely curled in what might have been a smile. And yet, they showed more restraint than the Dominion did with our medics. The Arbiter's gaze sharpened. The Council cannot allow this. If humanity chooses the path of vengeance, then it will stand alone. Thorn's expression darkened. Is that a threat, Arbiter? A moment of hesitation. It is a statement of fact. The galactic community will not tolerate a species that resorts to barbarism. Thorn stood, stepping forward, his presence consuming the room. Then let me make something very clear, Arbiter. He gestured to the burning world below. Humanity did not start this war. We did not seek conflict. But when our doctors were murdered, when our wounded were slaughtered, we answered. And we will always answer. He let the silence settle before delivering the final blow. If the Galactic Council cannot stomach our response, then perhaps you should have stopped the Dominion before they crossed the line. Veshlyer's throat pulsed with unspoken fury. But she knew, as did every species watching, that the Council had done nothing when humanity's medics were butchered. Thorn's voice softened, but it lost none of its steel. We are not conquerors. We are not executioners. But we will never be victims. If the Council cannot support our right to defend our own, then so be it. But know this, humanity will never stand alone. Because when the time comes, when some other empire threatens to commit genocide or erase an entire species, we will be the ones standing between the void and survival. Veshlyer studied him for a long, tense moment. Then, with a final flick of her tongue, she ended the transmission. The war criminal's fate. On the ground, the fighting had ceased. Dominion soldiers, once proud and unyielding, now knelt in surrender before their former prisoners, the very monsters they had unwittingly unleashed. Darius Cole, his armor streaked with blood, stood atop the ruined steps of the Dominion's Central War Citadel. His cybernetic arm flexed as he watched the remaining alien forces lower their weapons. Behind him, the other prisoners, men and women who had been written off as irredeemable, stood in eerie silence, watching, waiting. A UN transport landed nearby, its doors hissing open. Military police poured out, weapons raised, but Thorn's voice echoed through their comms. Stand down. They've earned their choice. Darius turned as a high-ranking UN officer stepped forward. The man's uniform bore no insignia, Black Ops. You and your people have served your sentence, the officer said. Your records are wiped clean. You are free to return to Earth. The prisoners looked at one another. Some grinned. Others frowned. A few shook their heads. Darius smirked. And what if we don't want to go back? The officer raised an eyebrow. Earth didn't just unleash us on the Dominion, Darius continued. It reminded us what we were made for. Some of us were born to fight. Some of us will never belong anywhere else. The officer nodded. The UN has need of soldiers willing to do what others won't. Darius glanced back at his people. Then he cracked his knuckles. Then let's talk. Epilogue, a lesson for the galaxy. The war with the Dominion ended with their surrender, but the lesson echoed across the stars. Humanity was not invincible, but it was unstoppable. Every species in the galaxy now understood a simple, terrifying truth. Earth did not seek war. It did not desire conquest. But if you attacked it, if you slaughtered its healers, its innocent, its wounded, then Earth would not respond with diplomacy. It would release its demons. And there would be no mercy.